Jalisa begins her life in service. From the time she could even comprehend words and even find her own feet, she was chosen as one of 20 to be the same age and, of course, the same sex as the princess. Her job was to ensure the care of the princess, to protect the princess at all times, to make sure that the princess's needs were all met. At this point, growing up, she almost got killed protecting the princess a few times. Once from a fall where Jalisa used her own body as a cushion, falling from several stories up, slamming into the ground, but the princess was okay. She was kicked in place of the princess from a mount that she warned the princess do not stand behind. When she saw the mount get anxious, she moved the princess out of the way and was kicked several meters, and she did not get up for several hours. Then she was shot from an attempted assassin, yet she was patched up afterwards. She even has the scars on her back of when she was whipped. She only had this because the princess fell once, and Jalisa couldn't catch the princess in time. Even with all this, Jalisa was happy to be of service to the princess, as she was the only daughter of the king of the entire Vantu Empire, an empire that covers 14 full sectors, over 20 occupied planets and colonies. A little pain was nothing, as she could still live in the lap of luxury, never wanting for much of anything. She always had clothing, she always had food, she always had a roof over her head. And this was worth, of course, a little bit of pain. Everything changed a bit during the princess's debut party, which every sentient species sent a representative to. As one would look across the grand hall, there is a mixture of different species of every single known sentient. From mammalian to insectoid, all arrived to see the princess and wish her well, and of course to forge relations by showing that they were willing to at least attend, if not fully submit. During this party, the princess is set up with the most elaborate dress, along with even slight makeup, which was not normally done in Vantu society. Yet everything was done to complement or accentuate certain areas of her, so that she could be shown as the true jewel of the kingdom. Though most species will not look at her as potential mates, the splendor of what they saw was enough to display how important she was. As the princess strutted around in her exuberant dress, Jalisa and the others, the other 19 of course, are staged far behind so that they could almost hide in the background. Everything went smoothly as other bipeds, like the princess's species of course, and Jalisa, since they are the same species, asked the princess for a dance. This was important because even dancing with the princess for just a few moments was enough for all the royal societies to know your place. There was plenty of marriage proposals as well, but one small instance almost made the princess break her character as nobility. She saw a few of the bipedal species ask Jalisa and the others to dance as well. Jalisa, being asked the most, of course, as they simply went up, raised the little bit of covering over her head to expose those wide eyes. Jalisa didn't look up and simply said that it was the princess's day and they should only ask her, but that didn't matter. After the party, the princess berated Jalisa in front of the other service, claiming how Jalisa was trying to upstage the princess during her own debut, screaming so much that even the security looked at each other in confusion as they couldn't figure out what the princess was saying, as she was basically like a tea kettle mixed with a train horn at points. Eventually, she got so angry that people were not trying to calm her down that she simply screamed, pointing at Jalisa, "I saw you smile at those humans. A bit disgusting with all that fur. I can't believe it. And if she likes those disgusting humans so much, then she can be with them." Waving her hand, the next thing she knew, Jalissa was being dragged away and placed on a transport as far as they would send her towards the human sector. When she arrived, Jalissa had almost nothing, as she was basically thrown out of the cargo bay and left there to fend for herself. She didn't know what to do. Her species does not wear much in the way of clothing, so she couldn't barter with that. The little currency that she had may not purchase much of anything. Can it even be traded? The only thing she had on her was the ornamentations and, of course, herself, which made her shiver with the idea as she looked around the station at the different species that were there. Wandering around the station, she was amazed. Everything was organized chaos. Busy shops with different species moving in and out, talking in different languages. Ships constantly embarking and disembarking after loading and unloading cargo. Humans seemed to be around, but not as much as she would thought. Isn't she supposed to be in the human sector? Yet, the one thing she did notice was that the humans always spoke, and they always make so much noise. Why? It was strange. Jalissa was able to barter food, and her credits did buy her lodging for a little while. Yet employment did not come easy, as she would not bow down and do things that were considered abhorrent in her eyes. Eventually, she was in the slum area, hiding herself from all the scary things around, trying desperately to figure out what she could do next. She was almost completely out of ornamentation. She simply had one small ring, and that was it, and this would barely cover a single meal. What was she to do? All she could do was hope she could find something soon. As she sat there trying to ponder, she actually giggled to herself, realizing how much her own people had messed up. She was supposed to be sent to a human sector, yet she barely saw any around, and when they did, the humans were simply talking and walking past her, not even noticing for anything. Yet she did not want to actually touch them. She heard that humans might be dangerous. She knew that many of them seemingly showed their fangs a lot, yet she didn't know if this was a threat or something of pleasure. Yet what she did find hilarious was the fact that her own people had not sent her into the human sector, but on the inside of another species sector, right next to the humans. One night she awoke to the sounds of screaming. The Glep were back. This quadrupedal species would raid the slums, taking what little anyone had, as well as enjoying themselves on anyone they found. She was able to hide the last time they came through, but the sight of the Glep forcing themselves on others made her shake uncontrollably. In several cases, the Glep didn't seem to care if it was female or male, adult or not, that they assaulted, and they would simply assault in turn, and sometimes to the death, and sometimes even beyond death. Looking around, she realized she had no place to hide this time. She realized she can't fight. She's too small for that. She doesn't even know how. She can't hide. There's no place to hide. She has one choice, and that is to run. Immediately getting up on her skinny legs, she got up and ran as fast as she could. The Glep are large, but they're not fast. Perhaps she could get away, provided she could keep taking turns. The Glep may be good at sprinting, but they cannot corner for crap. She could hear the yell from them, saying how they would chase her down and enjoy her. A few talking about selling her to different other species. She feared this above everything, and she ran until her feet began to bleed, ran until the muscles screamed at her to stop, ran as her bones began to crack inside her own body due to stress, all the time hearing the Glep pursue her. Speeding up, she would take a turn, and they would slow down to take that turn itself, and then simply speed up again, fast and slow, fast and slow. She couldn't figure out how far she had to run before they would stop, if they would stop. She then saw a light Oh no, she's reaching the end of the slums. What's she gonna find? She doesn't even know where she is. Running out to the slums into an open area, she found herself in a very large area. An area that was filled with humans? She ran towards the center even faster, but she started to slow down, realizing that the humans decided to stop talking and were looking at her, all seeming to try and figure out what the hell was going on. Why was this other species here? It then hit her that this was the docking bay for almost all human ships. Not their cargo, but their personnel carriers. This is where they transferred from one ship to another. That's why it's completely full of humans. She was still moving as fast as she could. As she tried to get through the humans, she realized that the humans are living up to their reputation. They're a bit taller and have much, much more musculature than she does. The shade of their skin is very bland, no real color to any of them. It's all just one shade, which is strange. The ears are very blunt compared to her pointed ears. She ran into the area a bit further and only stopped when she slammed right into a human and then fell backwards. The human turned, excused itself, and held out a hand to seemingly aid her. Jaleesa froze in fear. Her initial responses were not responding. She didn't know what to do. Run, hide, or fight. Nothing was working. She just froze there. She thought for sure with these massive humans she was so very, very dead. Then she heard it, and she turned quick, and she saw a horde of Glep charging out of the slums, climbing all over the walls and the ceiling like a bunch of cockroaches. The Glep then saw that this was full of human and demanded their prey be returned, even licking their beaks in anticipation of consuming her, and of course rubbing themselves in certain areas for anticipation as well. Jaleesa didn't know what to do as the Glep began to move in, telling the humans to get away. The humans looked as she scurried back away from them. Still on the ground, she tried to get away, dragging her butt across the ground, trying desperately to back as far away as possible. She backed right into something soft, and then she turned around and she saw, well, that wasn't human. This quadruped, this furry quadruped, simply sat there looking at her. It looked at her confused, its head slightly tilted, looking down and sniffing her slightly. She thought for sure this war beast for sure had to be ready to bite her, take her apart, eat her right there. The Glep demanded again that the humans surrender the girl, and that's when Jaleesa looked and she was amazed that she saw all the human males seem to move between her and the Glep. Without a word, the human males all seemed to understand the situation. Another human, a girl this time, grabbed Jaleesa and began to pull her back away. The Glep began to get aggressive as their prey was being taken from them, demanding that the humans surrender the girl, then surrender the other females in the area, then surrender their goods, money, and lives. Seeing that no human was backing off, the one in charge, obviously, the largest of the Glep, screamed out, "This station belongs to the Glep, and you know that. We are the law here. As part of the peace treaty, you are under our law, our authority, our will. Now surrender and receive judgment." The human males looked at each other slightly and began to draw weapons from their pockets. It seems as though every single one of them had some sort of weapon, some sort of sharpened piece of metal, some sort of projectile launcher, some sort of extendable rod. It seemed like they all had something, but they simply stood there. And as the Glep began to advance slowly to seemingly test the human lines, all she could hear from the humans were uttering the same phrase. "It's a damn shame, isn't it? That's right, it's a damn shame. Damn shame for sure." The Glep, now angry at the disrespect and defiance, charged claws forward. Jaleesa was still confused. These humans were travelers, most likely just changing shuttles. Now she looks, and she can see they're in a full melee with a horde of Glep. Why? Why would they do this? Jaleesa didn't have time to think very long, as a Glek was still trying to reach at her. What truly shocked her, though, is what happened next. As she tried to crawl away, a Glek caught her leg, and she screamed as the human girl that had helped her up swung out, striking the Glek as hard as possible. The Glek pushed the human girl down hard with his other claw, and only a moment later, the canine that she had jumped into went from the most caring creature she had ever seen to simply ravenous. The canine jumped onto the Glek, sinking its teeth deep into the Glek itself, and began thrashing around until it ripped open the Glek's arm. Then it seemed to simply spit out the piece of the Glek and went back for seconds, ripping more and more of it apart as the Glek screamed in pain and fear. Jaleesa continued to back away as another female, a very young one, came to help. A Glek ended up grabbing this little girl and shoving her down. At that moment, a teenage male tackled the Glek, held it down to the ground, and began to throttle it, one hit after another, right and left and right and left, slamming the head into the ground as blood sprayed on each side, screaming, "Don't touch my sister, you freak!" Urgh. All around, the Glek continued to fight, believing they had the advantage, as they did in numbers. But the sheer savagery in which the humans fought more than leveled the playing field. As the Glek began to retreat back towards the slum, multiple canines, followed by multiple humans, chased them into the tunnels. Jaleesa could hear screams of pain as they echoed out of the slum area, with sounds of large canines ripping the Glek to pieces. This occasional shot, the begs of mercy from the Glek, as she could hear things break, tear, rip, and splat. When the humans came back, they did not have the face of a victor at all, even though they were covered in blood, and it seemed as though the four-legged canines were actually ecstatic, all of them waving their big bushy tails around, seemingly prancing around as though they're actually happy about it, and yet the humans all seemed pale. It was strange. That is when the station security arrived, which was mostly Glek, of course, and tried to arrest the humans. Many of the humans started yelling about what they found in the slums. The Glek denied until the humans forced them to look for themselves. Jaleesa shuddered at what was back in the slums as she was able to go back and look. When the human security returned from the slums, most simply dropped their security badges and quit on the spot as they realized who they had been working for. Jaleesa was confused as what had actually just happened. As the humans began to treat her injuries, she finally began to relax as she believed that these humans were going to protect her. As the human adolescents that protected his sister picked her up and carried her onto a human shuttle, she finally felt something she had not felt from the moment she had arrived. She felt safe. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on Part 1 of The Banished. Part 2 will be out in a few hours. Just a heads up, the only reason I have not posted lately is I have been very, very under the weather, and it's kind of hard to record anything when you can't talk. Now before I go, I do still have to send out some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those would be Erica Gem, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, Douglas Scarborough, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, and Prozac and Pancakes. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.